the bookstore, Belmont Books, cleverly put us together because we both grew up in Belmont, though sadly we didn't know each other until this week. And it turns out that we really love each other's works and are very happy to meet each other. And I'm thrilled to help out with this exciting launch. It's great that there's such a big turnout, and I'm excited for us all to know more about Susan's work. And she's going to just start out by reading from the title story. Oops, you're not unmuted, Susan. You have to unmute yourself.
I invited you to unmute, so you should.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
There you are. Good, good,
all right.
good.
First of all, thank you so much to Belmont Books and Stacy and Rebecca for putting this event together and hosting the launch. And thank you so much to Virginia Pye for being involved in this launch. And her book, Shelf Life of Happiness, is amazing. I mean, everyone should go and buy it. And I also wanted to thank Four Way Books for publishing my book, and they're just amazing, and everyone's just been incredible there. And my good friend Jay Gardner, who took the cover photograph. And all of you, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate all of the support. So I'm just gonna read just the very beginning of the title story, We Were Lucky with the Rain. Lacey can't resist spying on her parents when they fight, which happens whenever her mother has disappeared for a few hours or occasionally the entire evening. Lacey lies flat on the wooden floor of their upstairs hallway, peering through the banister at her parents, who are yelling at each other in the living room below. Her father wants to know where her mother has been and why she never picked up Lacey from her piano lesson this afternoon, or her younger sister Eileen after school. I told you this morning that I was going to this mom lunch thing at Houlihan's, so I was late, okay? Lacey's mother throws her purse onto the floor. Only her legs are visible underneath a red dress as she roams around the living room. She bumps into the coffee table, left ankle buckling. You weren't late. You didn't show up. You didn't answer your phone. You had no idea where you were, and now you're a complete mess. Her father's voice goes up an octave. You could have killed someone, you know. Her mother starts laughing. Jesus, relax. I took a cab. Then where is the car, goddammit? If Lacey tilts her head a certain way, she can see her father's slippers pacing back and forth. She strokes her fraying rope bracelet that she got at her school's fall festival. Her fingers always work their way to its soft underside whenever she's waiting for her turn to bat for her softball team or perform in a piano recital. The car is fine, all right, her mother says. I left it in the parking lot at that Star Market by Houlihan's. It's not fine. It won't be fine. You can't leave the car there overnight. It's going to get towed. Her father's slippers stop moving. Then he stomps his left foot on the floor and throws a sofa cushion out into the hallway. A table lamp crashes to the floor, and her mother shouts at him to stop it, just stop it. Lacey can't understand how Eileen always sleeps through their parents' arguments, which often involve things being broken. A few weeks ago, her mother hurled a bottle of red wine against the front door. Another time it was plates. She's also thrown glasses, shoes, and once a dining room chair. But her father always cleans it all up, and in the morning there is never a trace of the mess, not even one thing out of place anywhere. So that's the beginning of
I know, it's
of
wonderful.
Story.
That's wonderful. That's great, Susan. I hope people can get a sense of the collection from that, because that's a very strong story. It doesn't come first in the collection, but it gives a really nice sense of how you interweave lots of different stories here about families, about people of all different ages. That story is told from the perspective of a child. You have other stories also from the perspective of children. You also have elders and everyone in between. And it's the collection especially focuses, I think, on families and often the misconnections within families, how people try their absolute hardest to find each other and often miss. It's quite poignant. There's a number of stories like that one where you can tell that the children are being harmed by the behavior of the parents, even if the parents don't see it that way and are oblivious. And it's, you know, it really is sort of heart-wrenching, but so subtly told that the reader isn't sort of hit over the head with it. You just have to, you feel along with the members of these families and how much they want to try to find each other and try to connect. So I thought it was a really beautiful collection. And I think one thing is that it's a mature collection, that you show a great deal of skill as you tell these different stories. And even though it's a debut, it's clear that you've been writing stories for, you know, a number of years and have really perfected it. So I think I really encourage everyone to really check it out. The other thing I really appreciated was also that the stories have a lot of dramatic tension to them. Like in that one, you can tell that there's a drama going on. Things happen in these stories, and I really appreciate that, because so often these days things don't happen in stories. You have escaped convicts, you have someone going off to prison, you have all sorts of dramatic things taking place that really bring your characters to life and challenge them in a way that I think really draws them out. So, so I just wanted to ask you about that in terms of the range of characters and the range of settings that you have. These are not linked stories. These are all stories about different people, different moments, different settings. What draw you personally to write these particular stories? Why these people? Why these settings?
Yeah, well, one thing that we've talked about is many of the stories, their setting at least is somehow connected to the greater Boston area, which, like we said, I grew up in Belmont, and even though I've lived in New York City for an incredibly long time, all of my stories, or many of them, seem to somehow relate back to Boston. And I've actually never written any stories set in New York City. They're all, you know, somehow set, or there's some importance. Not all of them, but many of them have a connection to the Boston area, the greater Boston area. And I always sort of think of sort of a combination of real places there plus my imagination. And the way I usually start a story is I often have like a character or situation in mind, like the story that We Were Lucky with the Rain. I had this image of a girl watching her parents fight, and that she was looking at them through the banister. And I kind of built this story around that. And I was just more interested to tell the story. And I often am more interested to tell it from, especially like children who are, you know, 10, 11, 12, because they don't have all of the information of what's going on. And they're sort of getting an impression of what's happening, but not the whole thing. And, you know, in this story, as it goes on, I think it's her realizing what's, you know, that her parents' marriage is ending, and you know, just coming to that realization that that's happening to her.
Mm-hmm. It really comes across. I mean, you really get into your characters' heads, and in this case, we really feel for that girl, because so much is happening that's just way beyond her, and she doesn't fully understand it. But I'm curious, like, how, once you have the inspiration for a story, how exactly do you go about really developing it and sort of helping it to evolve? And what does that require?
Yeah, so that's been a really long process. I mean, I think some of my earlier stories where I could come up with an image and it's usually I see a person, or you know, I see something and I get an idea and I could build a beginning to a story. It took me a really long time to figure out how to get them to, you know, to move along and come to an ending. And now often when I write stories, I feel like I write really quickly to the end and then I need to flesh them out. Yeah, I think for a long time I could write a beginning and a character and like a sort of moody setting, but not very much happened. And there was, you know, it was hard for me to get them going anywhere and to have action or, you know, a change or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. There's definitely things happen, which like I said, I appreciate. And you move your characters through different scenes, different moments, where it's not just emotional, but literally they have to go from one place to another. You know, they travel, they encounter different people over the course of a story. And so they get revealed in different ways. And so once you've got a story, once you've got these stories, well, how long did it take you to write this collection? How many years were you working on these stories?
A very, very long time. I was probably, I mean, I wrote a really early version of, I mean, I wrote these stories and a whole bunch of other stories. And there was a very early version of this collection about 10 years ago. And I've had to, you know, accept that some of the stories that were in the early version really just didn't work, even though some of them were even published. They just didn't work. And then I've written more or revised some of these stories as I've gone along. And so, yeah, it's taken a long time to put this collection together.
Yeah. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
No, and I was just going to say, I think figuring out how to place the stories and what, you know, even, you know, it's really hard if you've worked on a story for a long time to just put it aside and just put it to bed and say goodbye to it. And I think it was a lot to sort of figure out. I felt like, you know, to figure out the art, it sort of has its own arc, I think, a story collection, and it's almost like an album, you know, you're trying to figure out the beats of it. And I felt like the first story and the last story, I felt like connected to each other. And I have 3 connected stories in it, and those also shifted around at some, with it, you know, they have the same character. And so at various times those were all together, then they were split up, then they were, you know what I mean? So I think just figuring out the beats of the collection. Also,
and did you figure that out on your own, or did your editor help you as well? Or how did
my editor, Martha Rhodes, who's amazing, helped me figure that out. Yeah.
That's great.
But yeah, I played around a lot with it. They've, you know, printed them all out and put them around on the floor of my bedroom and shuffled them around. So many times. But yeah, that Martha Rhodes helped, you know, finally make the final decision about the placement of the stories.
Yeah, and I think it really says a lot what you sort of slipped in there, which is that you have some stories that have been published and that you chose not to include in this. And what that means is that you just have a great wealth of material, and you've also got a really keen eye, editorial eye, and so you really picked the best stories to put into this collection, which, you know, really shows they hold together, and like you said, they have a shape. And, you know, there's sort of an emotional arc to it. How did you decide on the first and the last stories?
Well, I felt like the first story, which is about a man who's been following a mom and her daughters for several months. I felt like that one was almost like about storytelling to me. You know, he hates the story of his own life, and he's trying to get into this other story, you know, this other family story that looks more attractive to him. And so I felt like that story was about sort of storytelling. And I also felt like the last story, which is called Swan Lake, which is about, it's actually about these escaped prisoners based on a true story of 2015 when those 2 men escaped from a prison in upstate New York. That also, that's sort of there's a lot of vignettes in that story of different characters. And at the end of that story, I felt also like this young girl wants to tell her version of what she feels like, what really happened while all that drama was going on.
Right, so that's terrific. And that's a story that's about 2 sisters. And I think it's so interesting. The older sister feels responsible for the younger sisters. You know, it's this dangerous setting where the escaped convicts are in the woods, but the older sister is self-absorbed, self-centered teenager, and she ends up sort of putting her younger sister at risk. But the story shifts at a certain point, and you get to see how much she cares for her younger sister. And that's a very touching story, I think. And it shows like how in families there can be this callousness and, you know, kind of carelessness between people. But then, you know, when you get down below it, the family members care about each other, which I think gets repeated in a number of your stories. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, which reminds me, would you be interested in reading a short excerpt from one of my favorite stories, which is This Small Good Feeling? And
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
another child narrator, teen, middle school or high school? Maybe high
He's
school.
12. Yeah. Middle
12.
school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Middle
Yeah.
school. And this is, well, I'd love to have you read a little bit and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
But I
Yeah.
just think this is like another place where the reader ends up really caring about this kid. So
Thank you. So this is called This Small Good Feeling. And I'm just going to read the first few pages of it. England is the best place in the world for Christmas, Travis's father told him. But Travis had overheard his parents arguing over whose turn it was to take him for the holidays. His father had lost, agreeing reluctantly to bring him along on his business trip to the UK in late December. This will be the first time Travis has spent Christmas with his father since his parents got divorced 4 years ago. They started out in Blackpool because his father was attending a convention. Travis was 12 and old enough to be on his own, his father said, while he went to meetings during the day. His father's work had something to do with website security and involved lots of traveling. In the morning, before his father left for meetings, they would look at a city map together and plot Travis's day. Blackpool's main attraction, a seaside amusement park, was already closed for the season. Most people came at this time of year because they had to for work, and it wasn't the safest place, his father said. He suggested Travis stick to the busier parts, like the promenade along the seafront. It stayed late only until mid-afternoon in December, so Travis made sure to be back in their hotel room before the sun went down. There wasn't much to see, but on the second day, Travis came upon a circus across from the promenade that was getting ready to leave town. 5 female lions were being transferred from their cages into a trailer. Men stood on top of the cages, herding them with gloved hands and wooden poles, and it seemed possible that at any moment they'd lose control and the lions would leap out and escape. Travis and his father also made stops in Manchester and Birmingham, but those days were filled with thrashing horizontal rain, so Travis stayed in the hotel room watching British daytime television or reading. Then they took a train down to London. His father scheduled all his meetings for the morning so he would have time in the afternoon to show Travis around. In 2 days, they visited everything worth seeing, his father said. Now it's their last morning in the city, and when Travis wakes up, he finds money at the foot of his hotel bed and a note from his father saying he'll be back in the room by 11. Then they'll head to Victoria Station and catch a train to Brighton so his father can go to one last meeting before the Christmas holidays. Make sure you have a wash, little man, the note ends. Travis starts running a bath. There's an electric kettle on top of the mini fridge, and he boils water, pours out a packet of instant coffee into a styrofoam cup, and mixes it with powdered milk and sugar. The concoction burns the roof of his mouth and tastes awful, but he drinks the whole thing. His father says he can't even contemplate a day without coffee. Travis studies his face for signs of hair in the bathroom mirror, but there isn't even the beginning of anything. At least his face has remained free of acne. The small tub fills quickly, and the water gurgles into the overflow hole when he eases himself in. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I love that because it's this boy that you very subtly show how much he wants to be like his father and wants to connect with his father. And I mean, just little details like the coffee, you get the sense that the kid doesn't like coffee himself. It burns his mouth, but his dad says he can't start the day without coffee, so he's going to do that. And then it just goes from there because clearly the son is not the first thing on the father's mind. The father is the first thing on the son's mind. But so it's this poor, unrequited feeling from the boy to the father. And it's quite painful, but really well shown throughout that whole story.
Thank you.
How did you get the idea for that?
I saw one time when I was in London at Christmas time, I saw a boy who looked to be, around 12. I was in a restaurant late at like midnight, and this boy was buying cigarettes from a machine in a restaurant. and then he was bringing him over to a man who's obviously his father, who's in a suit. And I just sort of had this, this whole scenario came to me. I mean, this was a while ago when you could still buy cigarettes and smoke in restaurants and stuff like that. But I sort of had
go
this
to restaurants.
right, when you could go to restaurants.
Yeah.
But I had this whole image of this boy and his father and their family situation. And I started, like, again, I had that for a while, just a boy in the restaurant, and I had trouble moving them forward. And eventually when I did the story, even that scene in the restaurant didn't really work anymore. So it had to come out, even though I still really liked that image. But I kind of kept slowly moving him into different places. I knew that they were, there was Christmas and they needed to go somewhere else. And that there was something weird that was going to happen to where they were going to go next. But it just took a while. I kind of kept stopping it at different places, and it was clear it wasn't really the ending. So I had to keep pushing. And I think when we were talking earlier about what stories stay in and what don't, it's also like what stories I felt like I could give more to, and what I could work more with. And some, like this one, what stuck with me, I mean, this boy kept staying with me. And I just couldn't let him go. And so that's also another thing. I mean, these people, it sounds so weird, but these people in all these stories feel so real to me. And I feel committed to trying to flesh out their stories and somehow make them work. So that's another thing, I think, why, I stayed with Travis for so long. And some of these people who, like Lacey in the piano lessons, in the story I first read, I just couldn't let go of her and needed, I wanted to feel like her story was fleshed out and told. So.
Yeah. And I think you really capture it by, through all this hard work you've put into it, because, that story about both of those young people, it really is very, it's very touching. It's very painful too, because you see all these ways that they're sort of trying to do what's being asked of them, whether it be, that real life example of, buying the cigarettes for the dad, everything's kind of so weighted in some way that Travis is trying to do what he thinks his dad wants him to do, and Lacey's trying, and these kids are really trying, but everything's stacked against them. The parents are not really seeing them. The parents aren't really caring for them in the way that they should be cared for. There's another story where there is a young person who's hanging out in a bar because the parent is a bartender, and there's another one who gets lost at an amusement park. So stuff happens to these kids as a result of the sort of the negligence that's going on. I think that's a powerful theme here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I teach writing, and one age I've worked with a lot is middle school. And I feel like that keeps coming up in my stories too. And I mean, none of the stories are based on anything that's happened to my students, but it's more just that, like, watching, I mean, that age is so interesting to me because you're able to reflect on your life and have memories of when you're younger. And, even remember if your family, I feel like middle schoolers are able to report on if there's stuff going on in their family. They're able to notice it and compare it to a younger age when maybe things were better. Whereas like younger kids can't do that, because they don't really have that point of view. And again, I just think watching, like, telling the story of a family that's not working out or where there's been problems, I find it's just more interesting to do it from, these kids' points of view while they're trying to figure it out,
Right. So you get that subtlety, and they're also so vulnerable. Like, they think they know what's going on, or they're trying to understand what's going on, and sometimes they're acting quite mature or independent. That boy Travis in England, it goes off. His dad gives him the money, and so he goes off and he sees the city the way he's been told to. And meanwhile, I, as a reader, am thinking, I hope this kid's going to be okay.
Right.
You know, I kept wanting to go like take these kids by the hand, you know, take them out of the bar and, you know, let them be kids or whatever it is. You know?
Right.
So, yeah. So,
Yeah. And
oh yeah. Well,
I was just going to also say, I think another thing about that age that is interesting to me for characters, I mean, not all of the main characters are that age, but I think also this idea that they're too young also or they don't have the language to sort of, you know, psychological language to talk to their parents or, you know, say what they need. And, you know, so that's another thing I think that's like, they're sort of noticing these things, but they're sort of trapped in the conditions of what's going on.
Right, right. So your teaching, it sounds like it's helps your writing. It's helps your sort of understanding of people and you know, where we are at different ages, but has it also hindered your writing in any ways? Has it just fostered it, or how has that gone?
Well, I mean, I really love it. It's very, you know, it's time consuming. So there's that part of it, but
Right.
I definitely feel like it's expanded I mean, I just get so much out of it. And I feel like, I think it's been really inspiring. I mean, I teach in with incarcerated women at a maximum security prison. And I teach with, in New York City public schools and high poverty neighborhoods. And I think to see people write these beautiful poems in way less than ideal situations. And, you know, I feel like, oh, I need my coffee and I need all these things to write. And they're just writing these incredible things. I mean, that's so inspiring.
Wow.
And they're doing it
That's
in
awesome.
10 minutes. And it also just, whatever I'm worrying about, you know, I had a lot of years of not getting published, and it just put all that in perspective. You know, I think a lot to sort of, yeah, you know, it's just given me a lot of perspective and inspiration, really. And you know, I would, you know, I think just expands your view as a writer of humanity and what's possible. And
yeah, it sounds a very rich experience. I mean, not just for you as a writer, but as a human being.
Yeah, and I've also
valuable.
yeah, I've also just gotten to meet so many other writers through teaching writing. So
that's great. That's
yeah,
cool. So what can you say a little bit about your writing journey? Like, you've been at it for a while.
I've been at it for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was in journalism for a while after college. I wanted to be a writer since college. I took an amazing writing class with the writer Nicholas Christopher, and that got me. I was so excited about short stories, and I would just, you know, devour short stories. And that's when I first wanted to be I dreamed of being like having publishing a short story collection. But it took a long time. So I worked in journalism for 10 years. And, you know, and after September 11th, I would say I really wanted to make writing be more central in my life. And so that's when I really tried to make it more a part of my life. But I also was teaching, and I had 2 young daughters. So you know, I was chugging along, but it took a really, really long time. And I guess in my early 50s, I had this year where I went to 4 funerals in a year, including several people who were around my age who had died very suddenly. And one was a very close friend, an old friend who I'd known since I was 6. So that was definitely a really big wake-up call to kind of, I don't know, that just made me take a really hard look at what I was doing. And I think that made a big change too.
I bet. That's good. And what is your practice now? Do you have time to write during the days, or do you just do it when you're on summer vacation, or how does it work out for you?
I mean,
are you a full-time teacher still? Yeah.
I still am doing some teaching even during this pandemic. I've been teaching not in person, but yeah, so I've been trying to write, you know, like Monday through Friday when I'm not teaching. I feel like I get better work done during the morning. I'm more of a morning person. I have better thoughts in the morning. So yeah, I mean, I think also all the years of having young children and teaching and just doing freelance writing and just juggling so many things, I think has helped, you know, set up, you know, routines, schedules, lists, you know, timers, everything to just try to keep going, and goals and
Good.
you know, all those things.
And well, you know, one thing I wondered as I read some, and this will be my last question, so we can open it up to the audience questions. I'm sure we've got plenty of people with things they're dying to know as well. But I was curious that some of the stories are, all of them are rich, but some are rich in the way of being sort of novelistic, in the sense that you could sort of sense them pushing against the boundaries of the story. You could sense that they could grow outward. I wanted to know more about some of the characters that were maybe not the point of view characters. I sort of wanted it to stretch out a little bit. And it made me wonder if you've thought about expanding any of these stories into a novel, or if you've ever, you know, tried your hand at that, or if that's of interest.
Yeah, I mean, I have written several novels that have not yet been published, but maybe one day.
Yeah.
And no, I think these to me feel like stories, and you know, I think they're going to stay as they are now. And yeah, but I have written novels, and so yeah, I mean, that form is also really interesting. And yeah, I mean, I think some of these stories started off as very short, almost flashes that I've made into stories, and then some were much longer. And always, I think if I hadn't, I mean, in the middle of writing these stories, I've written 2 novels, so I think that definitely helped.
Wow.
You know, expand my ability to make stories like longer, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah, no, exactly. That's terrific. By the way, I think the other reason why Belmont Books must have put us together is because I had written many books before my first one got published when I was 53, and have had 3 since then. I'm 56. No, I'm 60 now. And the point is, you know, late bloomers.
It's never too late.
I don't feel that with writing, it's like other arts, in the sense that I just think it is, you get better with practice, you get better with age. The novels I'm writing now are better than my first ones, and I imagine the same, you know, the stories that you're writing now aren't they, have greater depth than the ones that you wrote?
Yeah, you have more
in your 30s or your 20s. Yeah, and more sense of how the complexity that you're going for, it seems, it's deeper. They're deeper stories. I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you definitely have more information about human beings as you get older, I would say.
And more interest in portraying them.
Yeah.
With their full depth, I think.
Right.
I think maybe when I was younger, I could have been a little more satisfied with, you know, kind of something that maybe wasn't as dimensional as maybe now. Hopefully, you know, we get better with practice.
Yeah.
So I bet folks have questions, and so this is where Rebecca appears, and she will help us know what the questions are. Right, Rebecca?
Yeah, I don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Okay, well, we can keep chatting for another few minutes.
Oh, someone just sent a question.
Awesome.
Okay. This question, I believe, is for Susan, and this is from Jeff. And he wants to know, do you feel like you will write about new themes now that you've completed this first collection? So perhaps from a perspective of a 40 or 50-year-old instead of a child.
Yeah, so I've just finished writing, or not just, but I've been working on a novel that is from the point of view of an older woman. It's through her life. And it sort of flips between, it's a grandmother and her granddaughter, but they both age through the novel. So yes, I'm already writing about people who are, you know, older, I guess, than middle schoolers.
Mhm.
And also, just so you know, the short story collection isn't just the protagonists,
yeah.
not all
We,
middle schoolers,
yeah,
just
yeah.
some of them are. And I guess the ones we were talking about, or that I read from,
Yeah.
happen to both be from middle schooler point of view.
Right, we should definitely clarify that. There are some stories here that have grandparents who are key, point of view characters, and definitely mothers and fathers and, elders, etc. Did you find that that being a mother, that has influenced your writing?
Yes, very much so. I mean, in so many ways, it's really hard to say exactly, to pin it down, I guess. I mean, don't you think? I don't know, like, I think that, I mean, a big thing is time. I think that the scheduling and time becomes such a huge thing. I mean, I know everyone has scheduling and time issues, but aside from whatever work you're doing, you also have this other thing that takes up so much time. And then I feel like you're in situations and meeting people all the time that I never would have been in touch with without my children. For one thing. So, and yeah, I mean, the things that the people I've met and the experiences I've had are because of my children, are things that never would have happened to me without them, aside from, obviously my relationship with them. And I think it's opened up my understanding of parenting and families, I would say, from having my own children.
Right.
And especially being, a mother during, of a young child during September 11th and, through all these school shootings and now.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever written about those types of experiences more directly?
I have, yeah, I have. Yeah, in nonfiction. I've written essays about those.
Right. So that's so interesting. Can you share anything about, so you're writing novels, you've been writing short stories all along, and you write nonfiction. And so there's something in you that knows which goes to which. In other words, when you're thinking of an idea, when you're finding, some inspiration, something that speaks to you, something that you really feel you need to express, do you have any sense of how you are making those decisions about what way you're going to, delve into it through longer fiction, shorter fiction, or nonfiction?
Yeah, well, I would say with nonfiction, I mean, there's journalism, so that's one thing. But then writing personal essays, I never feel like my stories, I feel like, are very far away from my real life. Whereas the sort of, I've written personal essays about being a mother, and then the stories are just really separate from all that, except for, like the sort of emotional information that I've gotten from being a human being and being alive and seeing things. Do you know what I mean? Like, I definitely feel like they're really different. I don't know. I think that's why I like writing short stories and writing fiction in general, because I get to explore this whole other world and characters. And so if there's something I wanted to say about something I'm experiencing myself, I think because of the rise of creative nonfiction, there are so many ways to do that, now. I would say.
Right.
So,
but there are certain things that you would definitely just approach through fiction, that are,
yeah.
Sort of, I find for myself that there's sort of little gems of inspiration, or gems of something, an observation, like you just seeing that boy buying the cigarettes for his father. It's just a moment, but it can trigger the imagination. And
yeah. I mean,
that's pretty different than nonfiction,
right?
Where you sort of have to have a narrative, that's.
I mean,
from the start. Yeah.
Do you find you do the same thing? I mean, I don't, that this is going to be fiction.
Yep. There's a story in my collection called Easter Morning, and in it, a boy, a toddler, or he's like 5 or 6, I guess, he digs up a bird in the backyard on Easter morning, or rather, he and his father had buried it a few days before, and it's discovered during the story that the boy has dug it up and put it in his bedside table drawer. And so it's kind of gross, and it's covered with, dirt and maggots and everything else. But the point is that actually happened in my household. On Easter morning, our son actually dug up a bird, resurrected a bird on Easter morning. And I just thought, this is a gift. Like, I'm given a resurrection, an actual resurrection in my own household on Easter morning. And I just kind of couldn't resist it. It's not a heavy Christian story, but it is a story about sort of rebirth. And it's just little moments like that that are sort of encapsulate something. And then you kind of have to use a short story form to explore it in some way.
Yeah. No, that's an amazing story. And then also your New Year's Day story about that's based on a true crime story, right?
It is. It was a true crime that actually happened in Richmond, Virginia, where unfortunately a family was killed on New Year's Day. And the story just really, really floored the whole city. Like, it just really hit people hard. And it really bothered me. And I ended up having to write a fictional version of what might have happened. And it was, from the perspective of a neighbor or somebody nearby. And I don't know, sometimes you just sort of have to deal with things through fiction, I think.
Yeah. Did you ever think that you might want, because you really focused on the thing between the two mothers, and I wonder, did you ever want to explore that, like, as an essay, or were you always wanting to do that as a story?
I'm just not drawn to that as much, because I don't know why. It's sort of, I come out of writing poetry originally, and I think it's more that thing where you're sort of, you find some little idea, some nuanced thing that you want to explore. And I'm afraid if I tried to write about it in nonfiction, I'd have to do research, I'd have to interview people, I'd have to pay attention to the world as opposed to what I want it to be.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to pop back in because we have a ton of questions now, which is
now you
exciting.
Okay, please. Yeah, we can. Yeah, please. Go
So
right ahead.
two people wanted to hear more about your work with incarcerated women, and how you inspire them to write.
So I work in this maximum security prison, and the program that I'm in, they are doing the women that I'm working with are there's a nursery program in the facility that I work in, where women who've started their incarceration while they're pregnant can keep their babies with them for a year. And the women that I work with who are incarcerated, their job inside the facility is to care for, there's a daycare, childcare center for the infants. So they look after they work in the daycare center. So they also are part of, it's a really big responsibility, and they get some continuing education around early childhood education, and they have to take a writing class, a communications class. So they have to come to my class, which is the thing that the facility I'm in, there are a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities for them to take writing or do drama and things like that. But it's really great to work with these women because they don't view themselves as writers. And it's really great to be able to help them, maybe see that they can write and they have something important to say. And so all of my writing in school, in middle school, no one wants to write either. So a lot of my teaching writing is sort of intended to help people feel empowered to write and to feel that what they have to say is important. So that's sort of my focus, no matter where I teach. I hope that answers the question.
Great. Sounds great. Yeah.
Great.
Sounds like important work.
Okay, there are a lot of questions, so I'm just scrolling through them. Okay, Dan, no, Dan and Megan would like to know more about your comment that none of your stories take place in New York. What do you think it is about your life in Boston that evokes story ideas? Do you think it's easier to fictionalize your past than your present?
That's a good question.
I think so. I mean, I think so. And yeah, I think it's like it's sort of this dreamlike quality. I think my whole time in the Boston area for me now, because I left when I was 18. And so I think it's easier to make up stories. And, you know, like I was saying at the beginning, I feel like they're set in a version, you know, in my head, some things are kind of real and some things are, you know, in my imagination that don't really exist. I sort of have like a town in mind that's like a rough, like combination of a bunch of locations in the suburbs of Boston. And so, yeah, I think there's something like, I feel more like this dreamlike quality around the greater Boston area than my everyday life, I think, in New York City. Also, I haven't lived in New York City long enough to actually write set fiction in it yet, even though I've been here for 30 years.
Not yet.
I hope that answers that question.
You have another one, Rebecca?
Oh, sorry. So 3 people want to know about your inspiration in terms of writing and reading and just from your life generally. So who do you read? Who are some writers who have inspired you? And what motivates you to write?
Okay. I mean, there's so many writers that inspire and motivate me. When I was first writing, you know, first studying short stories and writing in the 80s, you know, Raymond Carver was obviously really big, and Andre Debut and Laurie Moore, those were like really early influences. And I feel like the mid 80s was, I don't know, sort of like a big time for short stories. I really love contemporary fiction and poetry. I just read Natasha Trethewey's memoir called Memorial Drive, which is amazing. And Ocean Vuong has the sort of that auto novel that he wrote last year. That's really incredible. Called On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. And I get to work with so many amazing writers like Ellen Hagen and Renee Watson and E.B. Savoy. So I don't know, I'm influenced by so many different, I guess, writers. And I read a lot of poetry now because I teach poetry. So I'm always on the hunt to find new poets. And what inspires me to write? I don't know, it's just something I started doing when I was in high school. I mean, I've always loved reading. My parents read, you know, are huge readers, and they read to us a lot when we were children. And, you know, my father is a writer, and so the written word is in storytelling, and my parents-in-law are huge storytellers. So storytelling is a big part of both, and writing and reading are a big part of my extended family. So I guess I turned to writing when I was in high school, and I was an angry, disaffected teenager. So I wrote a lot of bad poems in Belmont when I was in high school.
You too. We really do have a lot in common.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it's just like now I don't know, you know, I don't really know how not to write anymore. I mean, it's just such a big part of my life. So, and, you know, and I guess teaching it too, I feel like seeing what it does to people to be able to like tell their own story and the power of that. And, you know, to stand up in front of people and, you know, even if it's in just 10 other women in a correctional facility and like read a poem you wrote about your life and your pain, you know, it's you know, it's such an incredibly powerful tool.
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful. Rebecca, do you have another question?
I have so many other questions.
I think that's wonderful. I'm
Yeah.
sorry I talked so much. I didn't know there were other questions.
No, all good. They all came at once.
Okay.
This is from Anne, and she says, I am curious to understand more about why families that have such a hard time loving each other compel your curiosity. My question is whether wanting to understand the other is a theme in what you choose to write about. If you had to answer this question, what would you say? What guides your choice of subject? Is it wanting to understand the human spirit in all its brokenness, other? And congratulations.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Beautiful question.
I guess I don't really think about the subject of this story. It's more like these, like what I was talking about with this boy that I saw buying the cigarettes. Like, I feel like the more, I was really intrigued by that image. And the more I explored him, I kind of developed, like in my head, what his family life was like in my imagination. I don't really set out to like write about a theme. It's more that I sort of see a situation, and the more I explore it, that seems to fit, I guess, what's going on. And I do get a lot of ideas from reading the newspaper. So I don't know. I don't really set out to write about a subject. It's more like I see a situation or I hear about a situation. Like one of the stories in the collection is about a boy, about a family, and the last night before their last meal before the father's about to go to jail. And I actually read a story about that was talking about that, the family's last night together before the father was going to go to jail. But, I wasn't like, oh, I really want to cover this topic. It was just more like I was really struck by that. And I started, like, that article was from the father's point of view, and I started thinking about the kids, and I really wanted to write from that point of view. But yeah, I don't really have themes I want to cover. It's more like things just kind of appear to me that seem interesting.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap up because it's almost 8. I know not everybody had their questions answered, but I think this is a good note to end on. Somebody wants to know where we can read Susan's other works.
You can read, I write a lot for Women's Media Center. That's where all my journalism is. Or not all of my journalism, but much of my my current journalism is with Women's Media Center. You can reach out to me directly. I think most of you know how to get in touch with me who are at this event. I've written a lot for Brainchild. They're currently in the middle of becoming something else, so I'm not really sure what's happening with that. And you can go to my website and look for my work there too. So,
I was going to suggest that.
Name. Yep. Fullname.com. SusanButtenwieser.com, not fullname.com.
I just put the link to your website in the chat, and I also put the link to the event page for this event so that everybody who wants to can purchase both of your books.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Virginia, and thank you so much, Rebecca. I really, really appreciate it. And I really appreciate everyone who came tonight. It means so much to me, and you guys have all been so supportive of my writing for many, many years, and I really, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. This was a great turnout, and it was so great to hear from you, Susan, and Virginia, of course.
Thanks.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, thank you.